Well, hello and welcome to the Photo Brigade Podcast. I'm Robert Kaplan. I'm excited today. I have my friend Stan Honda across from me. How you doing, Stan?
All right, good.
I'm pumped to have you here. I know that we've known each other. We've seen each other at assignments throughout the years. I've been in New York City for about just over 10 years now, and you're a news photographer here in the city, just sort of rocking it for Agence France-Presse, AFP Photos, yeah?
Right. Actually, although I don't work for AFP anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
So what's the scoop now?
So at the end of 2014, I left AFP just to concentrate more on the other projects, the night sky pictures. And
so you're doing that pretty much exclusively these days?
Pretty much, yeah. I think I'm doing it more from a fine art point of view.
Oh,
rather
wow,
than rather than news. So basically a change in careers.
Do you miss the news work?
I miss the people. I miss meeting people like you and the other photographers on the street and on assignments. And the work I miss a little bit, but this is it's just really challenging doing the kind of work that I'm doing now. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, while we talk, I just want to put through so people know what kind of work you do. I'm going to share a handful of your photos just to give you an idea. But you were here in New York City during 9/11. So some of these photos here are from your 9/11. Can you tell me a little bit about what? I mean, we'll go more into detail about.
Sure.
9/11, but I mean, you sort of seen it all, the whole gamut of experiences here in the city.
Yeah, I moved. My wife and I moved to New York City in 1989. So I was working with New York Newsday from 1989, and then in 1995, they closed the New York City edition of Newsday. So I freelanced, and in 2001, I was doing a lot of work for AFP here in the city.
Right.
And so we. Another photographer, Henny Abrams, had called me up and he said, a plane has crashed in the World Trade Center. So we both got down there.
And so this was this probably one of the first shots you took of it then?
That's what I saw when I got out of the City Hall subway stop.
So you could actually they didn't I thought they shut down the subway stops right away.
They pretty early. I might have been on the last number 6 train because we live up on the east side near 96th Street. So I got on that train and made it down to City Hall, and I think that might have been the last train to come into the Brooklyn Bridge City Hall station. So this is what I saw when I came out of the subway.
So we'll talk a little bit more about 9/11 as we get to those in the slideshow. I just wanted to show a few. This is one of your more famous shots that probably made it all over the world.
This is the one that's one of the two that was picked up quite a bit by a lot of publications.
And then the guy walking out in the dust, right?
Yes,
yep. We've got those examples later. Also, you work on some projects as well.
Yeah, I do a lot of. I've been doing some projects about Japanese American history. My background is I'm Japanese American, a third generation, and so I've been doing some projects relating to the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II.
Yeah.
Both my parents and their families were incarcerated during the war.
That's
so
awful.
I'm really interested in the history.
Right, and you've done some travel as well.
With AFP, we had quite a bit of travel. In 2003 and 2004, I went to Iraq for the so-called post-war period. Mm-hmm. So AFP had a bureau set up in Baghdad, so I was part of that bureau for the 2 trips.
Awesome. And then politics. I mean, you've probably seen all the politicians, right? I mean...
Yeah, politics is a huge part of AFP. The main headquarters in North America is in Washington, D.C., so they cover a lot of the capital politics.
Now, for those that don't know what AFP is, because we don't have all journalism folks around, explain.
Agence France-Presse is a French wire service. It's essentially similar to the Associated Press, which is the American wire service, and AFP is based in Paris. It's a worldwide agency, so I worked out of the New York City bureau, and they have bureaus all around in all countries, all around the world, and with photographers and writers and editors.
And so sports as well. I mean, how much? I mean, a lot of people are just sports shooters, and some people are just news shooters. But working for this association, you kind of did everything, right?
Yeah, working for a wire service, I like it because we got a lot of different kinds of assignments from all different subjects. As a photographer from a newspaper background, we had to know how to shoot everything because writers could specialize in certain sections, news or sports or features. But photographers, we had to be able to shoot every kind of assignment, and which I like a lot. I'm not the greatest at sports, but I like it. I think it's fun to shoot.
So this is this shot of Shaq, winning something or other, the NBA.
The NBA Finals, yeah.
what do they call it?
Last time the Lakers won the final.
Not the Stanley Cup.
No.
But I've been in a situation before for the World Series where it's just champagne and beer going everywhere. You see these folks on the left, they didn't cover any of their gear. Did you cover your gear? Did you go in expecting this? What?
I think I had a couple of small trash bags in my pocket. So
okay.
you put some plastic, try to put plastic over your camera, but it generally... It keeps a little bit of the champagne off.
Right.
But the stuff is spraying all over, so
it just gets in everything.
I mean, as you can see, it's all over the lens and everything.
I remember
in this
how
photo.
sticky I was after an instance like that, because champagne gets sticky when it dries.
Right. So
Grape juice,
it's kind of wild to see, but the after effects are a little odd.
Right. And then, so as we mentioned in the beginning, you're now diving like sort of head strong into astrophotography.
Yeah, I do a lot of, I call them night sky landscapes. I had been doing a lot of work for the past few years on my own, away from AFP when I was still working for them. And since I was a kid, I've been interested in astronomy.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, I discovered that you could do a lot of this night sky work with the digital cameras in a way that you couldn't do it with film. So I started to experiment, and it was nice because I could blend the two big interests of mine, astronomy and photography.
Right. Well, and again, we're going to get more into that here in a little bit. So before we get started in going through your whole group of photos and everything, I just want to quickly give a shout out to Adorama. Thank you for letting us host here in our in the event space here. It's really great. You can check out more of their events. We post all of our podcasts and events at photobrigade.com/live. And also thanks to Canon Professional Services for their support. So before we dive into your photos, let's talk a little bit about your background. How did you get into photography? Where do you come from? Did you go to school for it?
Yeah.
And what led you to where we are today?
I grew up in San Diego. That's where I'm from, and I started taking some classes in high school, learning about photography and then the darkroom work. We shot film back then, if anybody remembers film. So I learned how
vaguely
to So I learned how to develop black and white film and print. I actually had constructed this small primitive darkroom in the garage where my family lived, and of course I could only really do it at night since none of the
that wasn't perfectly light sealed.
Perfect. Well, so and I worked for the campus newspaper. I went to college at UC San Diego.
Okay.
And I worked for the campus paper there and learned quite a bit there. They didn't have a formal journalism class, and their photography was more geared toward art photography. But I learned quite a bit working at the newspaper, and then after college started working on small weekly and daily newspapers in San Diego.
Did you do any internships, or did you just kind of jump headfirst into working?
I kind of went just headfirst into working. I did a lot of part-time work when I was at college for a couple of the newspapers in San Diego, and then when I left school. A little bit later, I was hired on by one of the small daily newspapers in San Diego. So then it was sort of partly learning on the job. I had a fair number of experience doing freelancing on a small scale, and then I got hired full time.
And you've been, until now, you've been a staffer pretty much ever since, right?
Yeah, I did. I was a staff photographer on different newspapers in San Diego, the Union Tribune, and then I worked as a freelance photographer for the Los Angeles Times for a few years. They had a San Diego County office before I came out to New York to work for Newsday. So
it was Newsday. A job brought you out here.
Yes, the job with Newsday brought me out here, and I worked with the New York City bureau of Newsday. So I worked in the 5 boroughs as a photographer for Newsday. So
you've been a New Yorker for quite a while now.
I mean, over 20 years, which is kind of bizarre when I think about it.
Yeah. Well, so we're going to get back into 9/11 here, and interestingly, when I went through school for photography at Ohio University, it was right when this happened. So I remember being in a visual journalism 101 class the morning of the attacks, and everyone sort of reported. We were hearing about what was going on, and our professor said, just turn around, go out, watch the news, watch history happen. Tomorrow we'll come back and look at the result of what all the news photographers out there are capturing. So while you were getting off the train, we're being told to go out, watch, and study what people like you are producing. And then we looked at all the front pages the next day through Newseum or whatever at that time. So, so let's get into it. I mean, this has got to be surreal for you. Did you have any clue of really what you were getting yourself into when you first headed towards it?
No, I think once I got down there, I had just heard of the one plane crashing. My fellow photographer said a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. So when I got out of the subway, both of the towers were in flames.
Right.
And I couldn't understand. It didn't make any sense to me. But in a situation like that, you're not really thinking too much. You're reacting, anticipating, trying to get pictures of the whole event, and
you're running towards it.
Running towards it as people. There were thousands of people running north from the Trade Center site, and I was basically running against the crowd, trying to get closer and closer.
So this is what you were walking past. Scenes like this.
Yeah. This was the picture of Ed Fine was taken after. I can't remember if it was the first or second tower had collapsed, and then he was part of a group of people that was just trying to make their way through the debris, trying to escape the area.
And these are some examples of how this photo made its way. I mean, this is one of many, many, many uses of your image.
Right. Yeah. The Fortune magazine used Ed on the cover, and then we didn't. Of course, at that time, I didn't know who Ed or Marcy Borders, the woman in the what they call the Dust Lady photo, who they were until about a week or a couple weeks after the fact. And then
you did some follow-ups on them.
Ed actually called the magazine because they wrote in the editor wrote in the issue after the week after September 11th that they were looking for this man. We would like to speak to him. And when they found him, they called me and Fortune said, "We'd like you to photograph. We found this guy. Can you photograph him for our magazine for the next issue?" So I went out to New Jersey and met him. So it was a really unique situation, I think, actually meeting somebody in a spot news photograph, which you almost never do. And I think I'm pretty fortunate.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then look at this. This is his pass into the World Trade Tower that morning.
Right. He kept that, and you can see the date, 9/11.
So he must have just been lucky, like maybe he was just leaving or something. I don't know.
He had an appointment, I think he said on the 87th floor of a tower that was hit, because he remembers the building shaking, and so I think the planes were hit the building in the 90th, 95th floor and above, and so he happened to be in one of the buildings.
So he was all the way up there and got down.
Yeah,
and
so he managed to
Incredible.
lead a group of people into a stairway, and they walked down. I mean, in his case, 87 floors.
Wow. I can't even imagine. Sometimes I go down like 5 flights of stairs, and I'm like, is it ever going to end? I couldn't imagine 87 floors.
No, with the smoke and the chaos and the craziness going on.
It's awful. So then this is your Dust Lady photo that you were just talking about. Is
right.
that what we called it, Dust Lady?
That's what people had been calling it over the years. Her name is Marcy Borders. We found that out a few weeks after September 11th. And last year, in late August, she died of stomach cancer. So the New York Times Magazine, this is a clip from the New York Times Magazine. The very last issue of each year is devoted to people who have died that year. And so the December 2015 issue had a nice article about her, and they reused the photo that I took of her.
Is this her as well?
Yeah. This is a picture after we found out who she was. A few weeks later, a reporter and I went over to New Jersey, where she lives, and heard her story.
Yeah, wild. And then, of course, all of the vigils that followed.
Right. Yeah. To me, the aftermath of September 11th was even more difficult to cover, because you really saw the impact that something like the attack had on human beings. I mean, I think the day of the attack, there was just so much chaos, and talking to other photographers, nobody ever had any kind of experience shooting anything like that. I mean, nothing remotely close. So it was just, you were just shooting pictures, but afterwards, I think it was difficult.
This is many years later now, because you got to One World Trade going up here.
Right.
It looks like.
Yeah.
But we still do the Towers of Light.
Yeah. I think it's roughly in the same location. This is shot from New Jersey, looking back toward the Statue of Liberty and Lower Manhattan.
Mm-hmm. I can see those beams of light. I live on the Upper West Side, and I walk around the reservoir, and you can just see them all the way in the distance, just going straight up into the void.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a transition into politics.
Right.
With this Abraham Lincoln shot. I don't know what the deal is behind this photo. Just random?
This is pretty funny. I think the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum, I think they had opened up a museum in Washington, D.C. So they did this promotion where they had a wax figure of Abraham Lincoln, and then they put him on one of the shuttle planes from LaGuardia to Washington D.C.
Right.
So they let us on board the plane right before it took off, and they seated him right in the front. So of course for them it was a great photo op, and to me it's pretty funny because from a distance he looks kind of real. And
I thought at first he looked real, but just kind of like fake sweaty and stuff like or something. But now that makes more sense. He's fake. This is a fake Abraham. Okay.
And it's sort of funny because the other passengers are just looking around. It's not like, oh no,
no big deal.
President Lincoln, no, he's not on the plane.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Let's get into the politics. I mean, I've never been in the position to. A lot of my friends like you and many that cover the president are always flying on Air Force One or photographing him getting off planes and so on. Obviously, he's probably getting off the Air Force One at this point. Or?
Well, this is during the campaign. I covered it a lot.
This before, okay.
Yeah, I covered a lot of we covered a lot of campaigns for AFP, and of course the 2008 campaign was huge for all the news services. So that was during the 2008 campaign.
Right.
And then this was a newspaper cover from the 2013 inauguration.
Right. Yep. Kids look a little older in this shot.
Yeah.
And this is the 2008 campaign here?
This 2008 campaign in Iowa. Hillary Clinton brought us a bag of bagels and breakfast one morning, which
that's
was
nice of her.
I think she was being a little bit. I think the media was complaining a little bit about access to her, and then one morning she comes out to our bus with. So it's sort of I
have bagels for you and
right.
bagels for you.
Right. So so that was a nice gesture, but also great photo op for her.
Sure.
Up close and personal.
Exactly. Again, and then is this the campaigning? This looks like he's president at this point.
No, this is. They
got Secret Service
in Pennsylvania. When the candidates are the nominees, they automatically get Secret Service protection. So this was in Pennsylvania. It was one of these unplanned stops where I think they passed a school that wanted to see him, but he was running out of time. But he made the motorcade stop. The photographers jump out and try to run down the street to try to get him shaking hands with this really happy group of children from a school there. I think they were pretty happy. And
these sort of things will never happen anymore. I just tried to. He actually went by my apartment the other day.
Oh, really?
He always keeps going to a fundraiser or something at one of these really expensive places by Central Park.
Sure, yeah.
And they just block. I wasn't even allowed to be on the sidewalk in front of my apartment. They literally barricaded the entire street down, and everyone had to go inside their homes and draw their shades.
Right, yeah.
It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It's New York City. Okay, great. And then you were at the inauguration. So so this is a remote shot?
No, this was a live shot from the 2009 inauguration. There was a position that was on the east balustrade of the U.S. Capitol, and there was only about 10 photographers there. It was a very small group of people, and I was standing. The great thing is it was a great view, as you could see, and I was also standing next to Bob Doyce from USA Today, a pretty good friend of both of ours, I think.
Yeah.
And with AFP, they split up all the different positions, and they gave me this position, and I think I did several different remote camera setups as well. But everybody wanted the position in front, like on that tower or a front position. You get this great front view of the president, in this case Barack Obama, taking the oath. But once I got in this position, I realized that we had this spectacular view of the mall going all the way to the Washington Monument. So throughout the morning, we would see it just completely fill up with people, and I think there were millions of people in Washington that day for the inauguration. And to me, this is a really good storytelling picture.
Have you found the picture of you in David Bergman's Gigapan?
Yeah, the Gigapan. I saw it. Yeah.
Did you find yourself?
I think I found myself, and because I'm way off to the left side of that image, and then I think I did see myself in that.
That's some good stuff. So you're with Monkey Moon is his name, right? And where is this?
Yeah, this is in Myanmar. The Secretary General took a trip to Myanmar after a big typhoon there, and I think that was also 2008, which was a busy year for us. And the UN takes a very small group of reporters on some of these trips. So it was the AFP's turn to be the pool photographer on this trip. So
okay. So let's explain that to some people. When you're with high-profile folks, or that's limited, you can't have 1 million people around especially in a temple like this,
Right.
say. So they send one person, and you're responsible for distributing all those photos to everybody.
Right. It was a very small group of both reporters and photographers, and I think one video person. So, as part of the agreement, then I shared my pictures with AP and Reuters, and I think EPA, the main wire services around the world. So, with those wire services, you'll pretty much be able to distribute to every single news organization in the world.
Right. Okay, so you've also seen some really gruesome things.
This is in Iraq in 2003. This is another pool situation where these are the sons of Saddam Hussein who were killed in a firefight in Tikrit, and they wanted some independent documentation by international journalists in the morgue at the Air Force Base in Baghdad. So they had the Army had released some pictures of them, and for several days, almost a week, nobody in the Arab world actually believed that they were dead. They thought this was some sort of U.S.
Hoax,
government propaganda, which
yeah.
oftentimes it could be.
Right.
And so the government said, "Oh, we got to fix this," and so they invited independent journalists and they asked AFP. They said, "Do you want to be the pool photographer?" And they immediately said yes. And then they asked me because it was dealing with the U.S. Army, and they thought as an American I could deal better with the American troops.
So how much time did you spend in Iraq?
Let's see. For both trips, the trips lasted for 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
And the first trip I was in half the time in Baghdad in the bureau there, but then half the time traveling around with different Army units embedded in their different travels around the country.
And how did you feel about that? I mean, was it scary? Were you worried? Was your family worried?
My family was worried. My wife, my father, and my sisters, and I tried to keep in contact both on email, and then I had a satellite phone. And I learned a lot from the AFP staff that was there. There were a lot of Arab photographers from the region, from the Middle East, and they were telling me how they had covered different events and just basically how to be careful. There was the head of the photo chief who was very, very good, and he would never, ever do anything. I mean, he always say, don't do anything stupid, and
right.
the picture is not worth risking your life.
Sure.
So that was good advice, and it was great to
So
hear.
this shot of you with a satellite and a computer, where is this?
Yeah, this was on an army base in Baghdad. I was staying with a group of soldiers for a few days, just covering their activities, and so I had the reporter with me just take a photo of me working on my computer, and then this is how we would send the photos with it was basically a satellite phone that was dedicated just for data, and so it would sort of dial up like the old dial-up system on your computer, and it would you'd have to point the top, this lid, which was the antenna, at the satellite in the southern part of the sky, and there was.
I'm sure it wasn't fast either.
No, it was sort of like the old dial-up lines, if you remember that. But you could literally be out in the middle of nowhere and send pictures. So it didn't really matter how fast it was. The key thing was that pictures were going out and people could get our pictures.
Yeah. And yeah, here's a few more. So natural disasters as well you've covered.
Yeah, that's another big part of a wire service, covering natural disasters. In 2005 there were 3 pretty large hurricanes. Of course, Hurricane Katrina, this is a picture from Biloxi, Mississippi, and I was along the Gulf Coast during the hurricane and stayed there for a couple of weeks.
So you knew in advance that this was going to happen? Like, did they send you in advance thinking, okay, there's some big hurricane coming, go cover it?
I was actually in Miami Beach. I think it was the MTV Video Awards, which I make a horrible celebrity photographer because I don't really know much of the celebrities, but they said, well, go and help out the guy down there. And so there were 3 of us. There was an editor, there was the Miami photographer, and myself, and then the Washington office had seen the hurricane coming on the weather and the news reports. So then we actually shot the video awards, and then the next morning I think took a flight to northern Florida and then drove the west way to the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, I was interning at the New York Times at that point, and I was changing my apartment because the internship got extended, and they're like, can you go tomorrow or tonight down here. This was before the actual hurricane happened, and I'm like, well, I would love to, but I literally am moving so that I can continue being here. And then it ended up being this crazy, situation. So I ended up going a month later, and it was still just as bad. It was awful.
Oh yeah, it was terrible. And then the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. I was there for about 10 days.
I also popped in Haiti, but it wasn't anything like photographing these folks. It was helping give aid to people and evacuating some kids.
That's important.
And then the shuttle.
The space shuttle coverage, I think, was one of my favorite assignments for AFP. Since I was a kid, I've really been interested in the space program, so I watched all the launches and the Apollo moon landings. So for about 5 years, I went down to Florida to the Kennedy Space Center and was able to cover I think it was 11 launches and about 15 of the landings of the space shuttle. So it was great to actually see the shuttle up close and to see the whole process as it gets launched.
There's nothing like it. I mean, I've seen it one time, and it was when I was like 12 years old, and I was on the big red boat with the Looney Tunes cruise characters on a cruise with my family, and we were coming in the night. We were coming back to Florida that night. So at 3 a.m., everybody got to the front of the boat. And it was 50 miles in the distance. And it's this big in the sky, but the entire ocean just lit up orange.
Yeah,
it was like nothing I've ever seen in my life. Even I was a kid, and I still remember it pretty vividly.
Yeah, the night launches are pretty spectacular.
Yeah. And then Occupy, I assume?
Yeah, Occupy Wall Street. When we're in New York City, when I was in New York City with AFP, we just cover whatever the events were that were happening in the city. So Occupied was one of them, and then Hurricane Sandy was another.
Hurricane Sandy was rough. I mean, luckily in Manhattan, we didn't really get too much, except for lower Manhattan. All the lights went out and everything.
Below 34th Street, it was hit pretty hard.
We had a few trees and stuff go down on our street, but nothing like, and this is downtown, right?
Yeah, downtown. Actually pretty close to Battery Park, I think. There was a big crowd, and I walked past these construction guys, and I see these cars just buried in water. It was just a bizarre scene.
Crazy. It's crazy that it's Manhattan. Oh, so this is the blackout.
Yeah. I think I definitely was below. Well, the Empire State Building's at 34th Street, so anything below that was dark, and this is sort of a night sky picture.
Right. So this was the beginning. It was that.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Sure. No, I can remember. I have a scooter, like not a Vespa like Chewy's got, but I've got got stolen a scooter and went down the street, and it was just the most surreal experience going down, like, I don't know, 9th Avenue or something south. And
because the only lights really were from the headlights of cars.
Exactly.
There was nothing else.
Yep.
And this was when I was in Boston after the Marathon Massacre.
So you're based here, but you would get sent to all these, like...
Yeah, the great thing about AFP was that there were only 14 photographers in the U.S., and so unlike the AP, we didn't have photographers in every city, so if there was a big event going on, we'd often get sent mainly on the East Coast, since we were in New York, and we had 3 photographers in Los Angeles who would cover much of the western part of the country.
Right. And so this is a tennis match, it looks like.
Right, a still picture from last year's U.S. Open. They showed the photographers on the screen during the Williams match between the two sisters, between Serena and Venus.
It's like you and Bob knew that you were being... filmed right then.
Yeah, we're the ones not paying attention to anything, which we probably should be. But and somebody snapped a picture and posted it on Facebook, so people got a pretty good laugh. So
the thing about have you shot Olympics as well?
No
Olympics, but big sporting events like this, the sports photographers get crammed into one section, and everyone's right there. Right. So you're basically all getting the same vantage point.
Yeah, similar vantage point. You'd be surprised at the different kinds of pictures people get, though, or get or don't get, depending on people's reflexes. So if I could keep up with Bob Deutsch next to me, I feel that I'm doing pretty good. I'm never going to get anything better than him, but if I can keep up, that's
right. Good. Right. Well, Bob's a great photographer, and we just actually had Bob on a panel.
Oh, good.
The other day on Olympic sports photography.
Yeah,
so
good.
You guys can check that out at photobrigade.com/live.
Yeah, the one big sporting event that I got to go to was the 2010 World Cup in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
And so spent 3 weeks there covering the matches, and
that's exciting.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I never
had enough soccer football for your life then.
I like it. Soccer's fun to photograph, so I like it.
Yeah. Well, usually when you're shooting professional soccer, you kind of stay in one space, also, don't you? Like, there's not much.
Yeah. Also at the World Cup, getting the pictures out was the prime thing that AFP needed to do. So our positions were all completely wired, and so we had to really stay in one position to shoot, as the pictures from our camera were going straight to the editors.
Now, I can say with certainty I've never photographed cricket.
Cricket is great. I had never photographed it until they said, well, we being in North America, we covered the West Indies team, and because they would play a lot of teams like India and Australia that were big worldwide for our client base. So they said, well, just go down there and people will help you. And so I got like brief lessons, and to me it was fun. It was a little bit like, obviously a little bit like baseball, but then on a much lower key level and much more relaxed atmosphere. You had to use pretty long lenses. All this stuff was shot with a 600 millimeter lens, and then most of these are crops. So if you can imagine, things are pretty far away on the field. But once I kind of got the hang of the game, it was fun to see. And
here's some more of the tennis. And this was the stadium before they put the roof on it, because now they put a roof on this stadium.
This is the Arthur Ashe Stadium before the roof, when you could get these nice sunsets when they were happening. So it often would make a nice feature picture right as the evening session would start.
I covered a couple U.S. Opens when I was intern at the Times, and one thing, I think I still have a farmer's tan from the being in the sun all the time.
Oh yeah, the sun's pretty brutal. And this is Serena playing her sister in that pretty big match last year. I think it was in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, and then back to Shaquille O'Neal.
Right.
All right, so here's a couple of your clips. An actual paper.
Yeah, actual paper. We get the New York Times every day, the paper, and actually read it while we're eating breakfast.
So is it still? I imagine that you've had your picture on front pages and covers all over the place. Is it still like amazing? Like you love it when you get that? What's the feeling?
Yeah, I like reading a newspaper. I find it hard to read a lot on a computer screen. So it's fun to read the paper, and then you see the photo credits. So I see what people are shooting. I mean, especially in New York City, and then you see people's names that you know from different parts of the world.
Right. Oh, so this is with your project here.
20 years ago, I worked with a writer on a book about barracks that were part of the detention camps that Japanese Americans were held in during World War II. My two parents and both their families were incarcerated during the war as a result of Franklin Roosevelt's order that rounded up everybody of Japanese descent, which included American citizens. Like my two parents were born in California, so they were American citizens. And so a writer and I worked on this book where they were preserving two of the barracks from a camp in northern Wyoming. And it was a really interesting project. I initially just went out on my own to try to shoot pictures, and and then this woman was also there with the intention of writing a book. So she wrote a book, and then last year she got a grant from the National Park Service to expand the book. So this black and white picture is from the new stuff that I shot last May and August to go in this new edition of the book. That's probably come out either later this year or next year.
Cool. Yeah, you'll have to let us know. We'll get that out there. It's probably be available on like Amazon or
Yeah, I think somewhere online. I'll let you know.
Okay, cool. So just a few more random. Was this with the series?
This is actually part of the series because the barracks were sold to homesteaders that farmed the area in 1947. So we were trying to track down some of the homesteaders who some of them are actually still alive, and of course they're in their 90s now, and they somehow have some fairly good memories, and they would show us their homes, which were the original barracks that confined Japanese Americans, but they now use it as their home. They turned it into a house, so they would show us the outlines of the original barrack and what additions they made. So it was pretty interesting how these families are actually now essentially preserving the history of the camps.
Yeah, really cool. And this is a beaual portrait, by the way.
We worked on some interviews. Sharon Yamato, the writer, was also doing a video documentary, so she was interviewing people. This man is a survivor of the Heart Mountain, Wyoming camp, and he was a draft resistor in the camp. So he has a really interesting history. And I just went to help out the actual video and shoot a few stills, and we came across this barbed wire that was near one of that's one of the original barracks in the background that a farmer's using as an outbuilding now. So we use that as a backdrop. And
then you also included a few other snaps that are interesting. So when you're shooting conventions or shooting sporting events or whatever, and people talk about a remote camera. this is what that is.
Yeah, this is actually my position at the Democratic National Convention in 2012. So the center camera, the center and the right camera had lenses that I would alternate between a very long telephoto and then a telephoto zoom lens, and then the camera on the left was sort of a remote control where I had a super wide. I actually might have had a fisheye lens, and then I would trigger that with just a separate trigger, which is on the countertop there, and so that I could still shoot with two hands, with long lens and with a super wide lens, because usually after the nominations are accepted and all that, they drop balloons from the ceiling, so you get an interesting shot.
When you're shooting this, you need to get the pictures out right away, right?
Right.
And at this point, are you taking the card, putting it in, and then editing it up and sending it out through your computer, or do you?
No, actually, if you look close at the picture, there's some wires that are coming out of my camera, and they're feeding into my computer. There's another shelf just below this countertop there, and then my computer is hooked up to the editor's computers underneath the arena at the convention here. So the pictures that I'm shooting are going straight into the editor's computer via my computer. So
he then captions it up and puts it on the
they edit it, caption it, send it out. So everything. I mean, within a minute or so of me shooting a picture, it could be out on the AFP wire, and all the wire services had similar setups. So it was because everything is people want stuff
right
instantaneously
away
now, so it's sort of nuts in that case.
Well, in our next podcast, right after you, we're going to be talking with Gary He, who's got a new solution to get it out even more immediately.
Okay,
so stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
And then this is we're going to go into your astrophotography now.
Yeah.
This is you. What were you shooting here?
This is me trying to stay warm in a place called Svalbard, which is an archipelago of islands about 600 miles north of Norway. And it was in March of 2015. It was one of two pieces of land where you could actually see a total solar eclipse. And this is the morning of the eclipse. I have a couple cameras set up in front of me. It was 2 degrees Fahrenheit when we got out there. So it's sunny, and it's sunny, maybe a little cool, but it was 2 degrees out there. So me and the cameras managed to survive.
And so you were shooting what exactly? You've got this film over your lens.
It's a solar filter, and I have a telephoto on that lens, and then a wide angle on the other
I probably put this
camera.
in the wrong order, so this wasn't what you were shooting.
No, this is
this was the blood moon.
The lunar eclipse, total lunar eclipse of September of last year, which you might have been able to see from the New York area. I was in Mamaroneck to see it.
Cool. Was this what you were shooting? No.
This is a different solar eclipse that was in 2012, which I shot this from New Mexico. It's called a Annular Eclipse, and it's when the moon is at the furthest point in its orbit around the Earth, so it's a little bit smaller than during a full total eclipse. So you just see this ring around the.
You don't get that sort of like.
You don't see the corona, the outer atmosphere. You see this ring, but it's a fairly spectacular looking eclipse.
How much time and preparation does it take to execute something like this? Because obviously you need to know where it's going to go, what exposure it's going to be. When it gets to this point, do you change your exposure throughout it, or does it all, you know what I mean?
Right. We spent a couple days scouting out this location it's a national park called Chaco Culture National Park in northwestern New Mexico, and this is a Pueblo ruin. It makes for a really great background, I think, for the picture. So we scouted out the location. So this was the spot that I stood at during the eclipse, and this is about an hour and a half worth of shooting. So I decided to take a picture every 5 minutes as the sun went through the eclipse. And I realized later that if I had put the camera maybe about a foot to the left, it might have cut off a little bit of the sun as the sun's going more toward the horizon.
Yeah,
so I
got working. It worked out perfectly. Yeah, that's great. It's exciting. And is this the last landing of?
That's the final landing of the shuttle Atlantis, which brought to an end the space shuttle program.
So that's funky. This sort of smoke trail coming off, and I imagine you're shooting super high ISO, it looks, and probably from very far away. Yeah,
this was actually from a remote-controlled camera at the end of the runway. We weren't allowed to stand at the end of the runway. We stood on the side of the runway, and in the damp Florida air, you see the contrails coming off the wings there.
It's wild.
And another from the this is also Atlantis before the launch. I was the one. Me and the NASA photographer were the two photographers on top of this gantry. Bill Ingalls.
Yeah. I got to get him on one of these.
Yeah, you really need to get Bill memorabilia because he's got a million pictures that are much better than this. Oh, well, also different, like really inside stuff.
Right. Well, he's
he's the main.
He's
NASA
the main
guy.
NASA guy,
Yeah,
and he,
yeah.
I constantly see his pictures. He's in Kazakhstan and there, and he's just flying all over the world.
He was in Kazakhstan. He's there right now because the Soyuz just landed. He has spectacular pictures. If you look on
NASA
just,
on Instagram, lots of his photos.
Instagram, Facebook, and just looked up the Soyuz landing, and they send them up in a helicopter, and he's got some really nice pictures.
Then the Aurora.
Yeah, this is the Aurora from Svalbard. Also, the night of the solar eclipse. So in about noon, 11 o'clock to noon, we saw this total solar eclipse. 12 hours later, we see this spectacular aurora, which I had never seen before. I definitely wanted to see one when I went on this trip because we were so far north.
Right.
And so it was really this pretty spectacular look.
And this looks like the same setting from your sun eclipse.
Yeah, from the eclipse. This is I spent a month, the month of March at Chaco Culture just a few months ago. I've been pretty lucky. The National Park System has these artist in residence programs at not all national parks, at about 30 of them. And Chaco Culture just established one. I was sort of the test artist, and so I spent the month of March there every night, or in the middle of the night, pre-dawn, going out and shooting pictures. And so it's a spectacular place, and the skies above New Mexico are just really nice. I go out there I go to the Southwest a lot because it's just much darker. There's less light pollution, less people that live out there.
Are you you shoot a lot of stars, and I mean, now that you're really interested in astrophotography and skyscapes and so on, how in tune are you with what you're actually shooting? Like, do you know these different constellations? Do you know, I know that you're also a member of the Amateur Astronomers. That's the word, association here in New York.
I'm a board member of the AAA in New York, and
.org, AAA.org.
Right. AA.com is the auto club, so don't go to that one. So I've learned quite a bit from them, just in terms of where things are in the sky and how things look. I plan out the trips a lot. I try to actually plan trips around the phases of the moon because a crescent moon puts out quite a bit of light on the landscape. So I've always been a natural light kind of guy.
Sure,
So the moon is a great subject a great source to light up the landscape.
Well, this is an example of that right here.
Yeah,
the moon's a light source.
Yeah, the moon is sunlight because it's the sun reflecting off the moon. So everything we see is sunlight or light from stars, which is the same thing. I was out shooting something, actually trying to get some planets, and it was too cloudy. And I use this as an example of when I teach workshops and some classes about night sky photography. Is even if it's a little cloudy out, just go out and see what's out there because picture-wise, you might actually get something that's interesting. And when there are these high ice crystals in the clouds, during the day and at night, you get these halos around either the moon or the sun. And they're pretty spectacular when you see them.
And so you're out there for the most part. You have obviously tripods and then all this stuff.
It's totally different than news photography because everything's on a tripod. It's a very slow method of photography, and especially when I go out in the wilderness. Some of those pictures that you just went through were from the Grand Canyon and some from Chaco Canyon, and it's almost meditative because you're out there and you're working really slow. Everything's on a tripod. And the exposures take 15, 30 seconds sometimes. So it's not, I'm not rushing through this like I was with the news pictures.
This one I was jealous of because it was taken literally just like right out my front door almost. I live right by Central Park, right in the middle of this reservoir, not in the middle, level with it. And so this is the north end of the reservoir shooting south at Manhattan.
Yeah, we're sorry we didn't call you. I was out with Benjamin Norman, who's a freelancer. He shoots a lot for the New York Times.
We've done a podcast with him. You can check it out on our podcast.
Oh, good.
But this, you had all of these planets and the moon. This is sort of like a rare instance where all of these are in the same shot, right?
Yeah, from about the middle of January to the middle of February earlier this year, you could see five of what they call the classical planets, the ones that have been known since classical times, in the sky all at the same time. And you had to wait till right before sunrise. This is probably maybe about 45 minutes before sunrise because Mercury is very close to the sun. And so you see Mercury way off to the left.
Oh, I see.
Venus, Saturn, Mars, and then Jupiter. And then this night, the moon happened to be fairly close to Jupiter. But yeah, this is looking south. This is actually panorama of 4 separate images.
Oh, okay.
I don't have a lens that's wide enough to shoot this.
That's pretty.
I have a fisheye lens, but then
that would have distorted everything.
Introduces some distortion, but the reservoir is a great place to shoot a lot of these pictures because you get a nice skyline and there's a little water where you can get some reflections.
Nice reflections. And then this, I believe, is the supermoon.
No, this was just. This is probably sort of near your house too, because this is looking west from
Right.
Central Park. Another time I didn't call you.
Hey, that's my apartment right there.
Yeah, I think
I can see me.
Right.
You can actually
are
see
cooking dinner.
inside this person's like kitchen there. That's
Right.
funky.
Right. Yeah.
It'd be fun to track down that person who lives there and say like, hey, this is a nice.
Yeah. Here's a picture of the moon. This is a crescent moon. A couple days after new moon, and I was doing a series of pictures for the class that I'm teaching now with the Amateur Astronomers Association. And then as the moon started to set more, it became very, very orange. So I just kept shooting from the east side of the reservoir. I'm looking over to the west side in this picture.
Right. And then another shot. So this is a little bit more exposure because the moon's a little bit more bright. Yeah.
Yeah. This is I show a few of these pictures to the classes and to the talks that I give to show that you can actually do some astrophotography in a place like New York City, which is probably one of the brightest places on Earth, because people always say, well, what can you see? You belong to an amateur astronomy club, so there's nothing to see. But there really is. You could see the moon, and you could see planets up in the sky at night.
What I think is interesting about this is when you look at the moon here, you're basically exposing for the dark side of the moon.
Yeah, it's the
unlit.
unlit side.
The shadowed side.
Yeah, because it's a crescent moon, so I've overexposed it because also the 2 bright lights off to the right side are Venus at the top and then Saturn about in the middle of the picture. So there was this conjunction of the 3 objects in the sky. This was early in the morning. This is looking east, so I'm wandering around Central Park at about 5 in the morning. Finding a location for this. So this was actually a pretty interesting picture because in the city you don't really see much of the unlit portion of the moon, which is called Earthshine. This is actually the sunlight that's reflecting off the lit part of the Earth, hitting the moon and then coming back to the Earth.
Oh, I see.
And so you see this in photographs, and if you're in a very, very dark location without any light pollution, you could see it with your eyes.
Yeah.
It's difficult to see in New York just because of the haze, usually the haze in the atmosphere, but it showed up pretty good in this photo.
Right. Ooh, this is cool. This is Venus going
Yeah, this
going
is the
past?
transit of Venus in 2012, in June of 2012, and our club, the AAA, we had a big gathering on the pier on, I think it was West 70th Street. Had a few hundred people there looking through telescopes with solar filters on, and I had a filter on my camera. I had a 400 millimeter lens with a 1.7x teleconverter, so made it in a pretty long telephoto, essentially a small telescope. And then I was shooting pictures of the transit. We got a couple through the clouds. We got a couple of views of Venus crossing the sun.
And I think we have a few pictures that we looked at earlier, but that made it onto the front page of USA Today. That shot, yeah.
Yeah, USA Today used that picture on their front page the next day.
Right. And star trails.
Yeah, star trails
cool.
from Chaco Canyon in New Mexico.
Man, so you like really nailed that, right? The center of it is right framed in there, it looks like.
Yeah, Polaris, the North Star, is the one star that doesn't move in our night sky because it's located directly above the North Pole, and so it's in line with the axis of our planet. And the stars really aren't moving; we're moving. The Earth is moving, so it appears like the stars are going in a circle around Polaris. I'm inside one of the pueblos at Chaco Canyon, looking straight up. If you could kind of envision a room with 4 walls but no ceiling, I'm looking straight up, and the windows are still intact in these structures, which is this one happens, I think, dates back to about 850 AD. So it's amazing that it's still there. And then there's a north-facing window that I tried to get Polaris lined up in the window. So it's a one star.
And how long is this exposure, would you say?
It's 1 hour. It's the equivalent of an hour. With digital, you actually have to shoot a whole series of shorter exposures. I think this is 20 separate 3-minute exposures, but they're all taken a second apart. And so then I take 20 3-minute exposures, and so that's the equivalent of 60 minutes of time. and then I assemble everything on my computer afterwards.
And the reason being is because is it a noise issue on the?
It's a noise issue. Once you go past 4 or 5 minutes with the digital camera, you start to pick up so much electronic noise that the picture just it just gets worse and worse. With film, you would just leave the shutter open for an hour,
right?
And then you would have one frame with the star trails on.
Right. That's wild.
At Rocky Mountain National Park, it was pretty nice because of there's a lot of water, and I was used to, up until this point I was actually photographing a lot in the Southwest, so it was a much different environment than I was used to.
Right. Cool.
And this is sort of the similar idea, looking straight up through a grove of trees at Rocky Mountain.
And so this one, it wasn't super long at all because obviously the stars are, straight. I mean, this is, but it's probably at least a few seconds or something.
This is a 30-second exposure.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Stars aren't very bright, as I've found out, and that oddly enough, in the darker areas that you go where there's less and less light pollution, you need much longer exposures because of you're just recording the light from the stars.
Right. That's the only light.
That's the only light.
The crazy thing to think is that light that's exposing into your film is like millions of years old. That light.
Yeah. At least several, like tens of thousands of years old. This is the center of the Milky Way. So the center of the Milky Way.
Oh, that's newer. Yeah.
Is about 25,000 light years from us. So the light.
25,000.
Yeah, that's quite a bit. And then, of course, the Andromeda Galaxy is the furthest thing you could see with your eyes, and that's 2 million light years away. So 2 million years worth of light.
All right. So you just out-nerded me. Got it. All right. Wow.
This is
great.
the total eclipse from Savard, and it was just as the moon is slipping off the face of the sun. So you get this what they call a diamond ring pattern of the sun just peeking around the moon. And this picture I liked a lot because it shows the eclipse in relation to the group of people that were also watching.
It gives a lot of scale.
And just a better perspective. And this was also NASA has this website called Astronomy Picture of the Day. So I off and on I send them pictures, and this was the Astronomy Picture of the Day the day after the eclipse. They liked this one.
Super cool. And did you go out on assignment for this, was it?
I went on my own, and
just
then
did it on your own.
Then I did a couple days worth of freelance work for AFP, and then so I sent them some feature pictures and then a few pictures of the eclipse itself.
Awesome.
This is a total eclipse in New Mexico at this really great site, the Very Large Array, which is a telescope radio installation in the central part of the state. And a friend of mine lives in Albuquerque, and he says, well, let's go down to the VLA to shoot pictures of this eclipse because we could try to get one of the antennas in the picture. Because they're these enormous antennas. And so we figured out where the moon would be, the angle, how high it would be. And then, so this is between 12 and 3 in the morning on the night of the eclipse. And we're hanging out in his van for 3 hours trying to shoot this picture.
I mean, when you're doing these, you say that it's peaceful and so on. Does it get boring though? Because I mean I've done time lapses in the past, and it's just kind of like you set it and you're like, okay.
For me, once the camera is going, usually I'm in a place which looks like this, which is in Arizona, and there's a million stars overhead, and so sometimes I just sit back and look at the stars. I usually put a pair of binoculars in my backpack, and because they're easy to use, and I'll just look around at stuff with my binoculars, and it's quite a bit of fun. I'm usually running around also from location to location getting pictures, but it never gets boring out there.
Right. All right. Well, your work's amazing. Do you have any before we end this? Do we have any idea of what you're going to end up doing with all this?
Well, I have
nightscape stuff.
Yeah, I sell prints on my website, and I'm trying to do gallery shows. I'm talking right now with the New Mexico Museum of Natural History about a possible show of the New Mexico pictures. So, and then I'm working with this friend on an idea for a book. So
cool.
Trying to do all these different things with the images themselves.
Sort of living the freelance life and figuring it out as it goes, right?
Right. Yeah. It's and I'm applying for more of the artist in residence programs at the national parks. So it's a lot of writing of proposals and just figuring out where I want to shoot the next couple things I want to shoot.
Lastly, I want to give a shout out to the Amateur Astronomers Association of New York for those of you who are watching from New York or those of you in the audience. To be part of it, it's a relatively low fee. I think it's like $30 or something like that.
$35 for
you
the
get
membership.
a digital magazine. You get to come to their different events and viewings and things like that.
We do a lot of public viewing through telescopes especially during the summer, Tuesday at the High Line and Friday, Saturday at Lincoln Center in Manhattan, and then there's a whole schedule on the website, which is AAA.org.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I think that's about it. Thanks everybody for coming along. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Stan, for making this happen.
Yeah,
it's great
Robert.
to see you.
Great to be here.
And hopefully we'll see you all next time. photobrigade.com/live. Subscribe to us on YouTube. And thanks to Canon and to Adorama for making this happen.